We're sending our money to drop bombs on other people's children, subsidizing a genocide in Gaza, empowering Israel through the war that they've been trying to push for 40 years. That money should not be spent $1 billion a day killing other people's children. It should be spent providing for our own. All of my work has been about trying to provide for people in our country. People say to you, doctor, how are you going to pay for that? I really wish people asked the same question to a general drawing up war plans to drop bombs on other people's children. General, how are you going to pay for that? And I hope to be the person who does that.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
Visit sumudpod.com to subscribe and connect with us on social media. You can also support our work by contributing monthly on the Support Us page. Even $10 a month helps us continue amplifying Palestinian voices and those in solidarity. Thank you.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify Michigan Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed. Welcome, brother. How are you?
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Did I get the name right?
You killed it. Abdul El-Sayed. It's like it's a lot of names. Got sounds that come out of parts of people's throats that they don't know they have. But honestly, I'm very proud of my name and I'm grateful for it. And it's funny. I go by Abdul, as you know. I've been Abdul since kindergarten because nobody can say Abdurrahman. And people are like, well, you have a terrible name for politics. I'm like, well, if you actually translate what Abdul El-Sayed means, it means servant leader. I actually think I got a great name for politics.
Beautiful name. I hear you, man. So let me just read a little bit about you really quick, if you're okay with that. At the age of 30, you became the youngest health official of a major American city. You stepped into Detroit when its health system had collapsed and rebuilt it from the ground up. You went on to serve 1.8 million people in Wayne County. You're a Rhodes Scholar, the author of Healing Politics, and the creator of the podcast America Dissected. And now you're running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. This episode is proudly sponsored by Palestinian-American attorney Ibrahim Awad. You may know him as the Karate Attorney. He's a huge member of our community and a big supporter of the podcast. Follow him at Karate Attorney on all social media outlets or visit his website, karateattorney.com. My first question for you, seriously, what the heck did your parents put in your kushery?
Extra man. my kushery was so sour.
3-sport athlete, Rhodes Scholar. You went to, you were in medical school. You're like, I'm going to put that on hold and, go across the country and do something else to a different country at Oxford. And then you came back. I mean, what did they feed you, man?
Well, honestly, I am so deeply privileged to have gotten opportunities that I got. There's one thing about having opportunities, and there's another about knowing you have opportunities. So I was raised by my dad, who's an Egyptian immigrant, my stepmom, Jackie, who's a daughter of the American Revolution. So my dad really wanted to make sure that I understood where he was from, right, and our roots. And so they'd ship me off to Egypt as soon as I was old enough. Now, my dad was the eldest to my grandmother, my teta, so I had the smartest person I ever met in my whole life. Never got to go to school. She was illiterate. She lost 2 of the 8 babies she gave birth to. My grandfather sold vegetables in a fish market. So it is an accident of history that I got to grow up where I got to grow up, that I got the opportunities I got. My grandmother, my teta, would pull me aside. I remember in particular being 13 years old, and she didn't quite like the way I was behaving, right? Because I had this, I'd always come with like a trunk full of gifts, as one does when you go to the bed, right?
Yeah.
So I was like some combination of like, the muscly cousin from America with the cool hat backwards and Santa Claus. And so, I'm sort of getting this royal treatment from my cousin. She pulls me aside. She's like, that one is smarter than you. That one is taller and better looking. That one's more athletic than you. That one. And I remember I was like, by the end of it, I was like, do I have anything? She's like, yep, you have the most important one. I was like, what is that? She's like, you get to go back to America at the end of the summer. The rest of your cousins stay here. That cousin of mine who was smarter than me died in an auto accident at 27. My life is an accident of history. It's funny, when you run for office and you got a name like mine, people like to come out of the woodworks. They say, well, you must hate America. No, I love America. I know exactly what my life could have been but for America. And at the same time, I also came to understand that the smartest person I ever met never got to go to school. So when they tell you, oh, you're so smart and hardworking, I'm like, no, man, she was smart and hardworking.
Is she still?
She passed away.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
But, it reminds you that the time you have here is borrowed and the opportunities you have here are not fixed. And it is your job to do the most you can with the opportunities you have. And the question ultimately we are asking ourselves is my life about serving my own well-being or is it about trying to create opportunity for people who don't have it? And I've tried throughout my career to be about trying to make opportunity for people who don't have it, which, may explain it's either that or the kushari. So.
In researching you, your North Star was clearly your grandmother. That's my opinion. You could tell me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely. I ask myself every day, would Tita be proud of what I'm doing?
That's the question I have. When did she pass away, if you don't mind me
I was
asking?
14.
You were 14?
Yeah.
Looking at you now, mashallah, accomplished in everything that you're trying to do, and clearly you're trying to change the world here. What would she say to you? Would she say to you, don't forget to stay humble here?
Yep. I think all of us who had the privilege of knowing our grandmothers, there's a special thing that your grandmother can do for you, right? Like they're usually one of the smallest, and maybe not the most physically strong person in your life, but like the courage, the compassion, the ability to both lift you up and hold you down at the same time. She was that for me. And I hope she'd be proud. I also know that she'd say, like, at the end of the day, you're just a vessel for something, and you have a responsibility to that thing, and you got to run through the tape. So,
do you hear her voice? I mean, do you hear her voice sometimes? I know it's an odd question when you're making a decision or going through a process.
I can see her face. You know how like the most important people in your life, they don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, my wife is that way. I don't have to, like, I just know. I know what she's thinking. I can see it on her face. One tilt of an eyebrow. I'm like, I know exactly what you're saying. It's like a paragraph in a tilt. And my teta was that way. The indelible image of her for me was that, she had a little Bunsen burner, didn't really have a real stove. And she used to cut onions in her hands, no cutting board. And she did this thing where she would drop the onion and then sort of twist the onion and drop the knife. And then you get these like half a centimeter perfect little pieces of onion. And I'd usually be sitting with her and we'd be talking. And then if I said something she didn't like or had an opinion, she'd stop. And then she'd look up and then she'd keep going. And so, half the conversation was that kind of coaching. And usually she didn't have many words. She was not somebody who, she didn't know how to read, but she had this gift of saying a few things that meant so much. So I think about her presence all the time. I am so grateful for her impact in my life. Like, one of the great points of privilege that I have is I get to tell her story. This is somebody who, how many countless people live and die who are like giants in their communities whose stories never get told. And I'm grateful I get to tell hers, and I hope I do it justice.
Think of your last memory of her.
I remember leaving Egypt, and I would always, she was 5'1", so I'd bend over and she'd give me a kiss on the forehead. And she would always tell me to say, to remind my dad and my siblings that she was thinking about them. And, my last memory of her was actually leaving for America after a summer at the airport, and just, I didn't know it was going to be the last time I saw her, but, and then I remember when my dad, I've seen him cry twice. And one of them was when he had to share that his mother had passed. Allah yarhamha.
Well, hopefully the third time will be when you win Senate.
Bismillah.
Inshallah, right?
Inshallah.
So who are you, man? Like, you're this all-American, you're this Egyptian, you're this guy from Michigan, you're Muslim, you grew up and you experienced the effects of 9/11. Who were you before today? And I think that's really the story that's still missing, to be honest with you, is how did you come to be who you are now?
I think I was really confused when I was a kid. I was raised in this half white, half Egyptian household. In those summers, I would come home at the very end of the summer from Alexandria and then spend a week at a cottage on a lake in the middle of Michigan, hanging out with the other side of my family, who couldn't imagine where I just was. It's a pretty crazy thing. I have multiple grandmothers. And imagine having to try and explain one grandmother to the other one, right? And also recognizing that the kiss that your grandmother gives you on the forehead, the joy that she expresses when she makes your favorite meal, when she tells you it's going to be okay, it's the same, whether she's saying it in Arabic or English, whether she's your illiterate grandmother who raised 6 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment in Egypt, or it's your nurse grandmother who raised 3 kids in a bungalow in the Midwest. I think when you're young, you kind of just want to fit in. And so you kind of have to ask, like, where do I fit in? And I've been given the great gift of having to explain myself everywhere I go. When I was in Egypt, I was the American. When I'm in America, the first thing everybody recognizes is my name, my faith, right? The color of my skin. So you just get really good at explaining yourself. And what happens then is that you realize it's actually a real gift to be able to walk between worlds and not fit perfectly in any one box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what happens is you get to redefine the boxes. So I am both the captain of my high school football team. I am a scientist and a doctor. I am a proud Arab and Muslim American. I'm proud of, my white family in the middle of the state of Michigan. I am proud to be the grandson of my incredible grandmother. And I'm also proud to have family that can literally trace their lineage back to Abigail Adams. And I'm proud that I get to be all of those things. Because here's the interesting thing about it, is that one of the cool things about being able to walk between worlds is you can bring the stories from one to the other. And when you can do that, you can identify the similarities between one and the other. And what you reinforce is the least common denominator, which is the foundational things that make us human, the things that we care most about. That feeling that you get when you look your kids in the eye, that sense of what it feels like to be comforted by a grandmother, the joy of eating your favorite meal, the happiness that you get on a day when your work ends early and you're just like, oh, I don't have anything I have to do right now. The meaning of being able to meet that person you want to spend your life with, whoever that person is. Those are things that everybody experiences. And yet we're so busy thinking about the things that are different. So when you're different to everybody, at the end of the day, you think about the things that are the same. And if I get to spend my life reinforcing those things about us and calling us to those things, that's a real gift. And I'm grateful. I think, my grandmother was trying to share that I had these opportunities that other people didn't get. She couldn't have imagined what my opportunities would be. I mean, she really, really couldn't have imagined it. Yeah. But also she understood that there was something different about what I was in a position to be able to experience and do. And she always pointed me back to that thing. Not that you're any smarter, not that you're any harder working, not that it's not you. It's that you get to walk between these worlds. You get access to these things that other people don't get. So what are you going to do with it? Right? And that was always the question. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Were you bullied at all as a young man?
Always. I mean, we moved a lot when I was a kid. And, when you start school and your name's Abdul, right? You can imagine people going to come after you. And I learned how to deal with bullies. I mean, I remember the first time, I spoke English with an accent at the time. And I remember literally just, letting a guy take my lunch money and feeling so bad about it and whimpering in the corner. And the next time we moved, I told my dad, I was like, I'm going to come home early today. He was like, why? I was like, I'm going to get sent home early. I want you to know. And he was like, what's going to happen? And lo and behold, first kid who stepped to me, I was like, all right, I know how to deal with this. And it's one of those things where I was just like, all right, man, it's going to be me or you, and I am not going to experience this again. And at the end of the day, I taught him and everyone else a lesson. And for the rest of the year, nobody messed with me about my name, and I didn't mess with anyone else, right? But you learn something about bullies. And it's funny because you watch everybody dealing with Trump now, and they keep thinking that if you give him more of your lunch money, that he's going to stop. Bullies are insatiable. And they don't bully because they really want your stuff. They bully because they think the thing that they're going to take away from you is going to fill a hole in them that they can't fill elsewise. And they'll never fill the hole. At the end of the day, one of the things you start to appreciate is when you stand up to bullies, you're also not just standing up for yourself. Yeah. You're standing up for everybody else who they bully and get away with. So, you start to enjoy it.
Yeah. You confuse me a little bit. How do you, when you go to college, decide that, I'm going to do politics and I'm going to do biology? Those are two disparate majors, two disparate worlds. First of all, how did you even pull that off?
So I knew I loved science.
Okay.
I've always loved science. I love the pursuit of science. Most people who study science think about science as the answers. It's not. Science is about the question.
Yeah.
It's just a very rigorous way to answer a question, right? And I was interested in politics in part because I kind of wanted to know my own history. Mm-hmm. And politics seemed to be a very important lens on understanding who I was. As a person of color in America who's not black, I turned to folks like Alex Haley and Dr. Martin Luther King and Fannie Lou Hamer and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X. And I read, what is the history of being a racialized other in America? And at the same time, understanding that I had so much privilege as a function of the fact that my dad came to do a PhD at Wayne State in Detroit, right? And so understanding the politics of the region from which I came, understanding the domestic politics in the country of my birth, understanding all of that from the lens of how do we divvy up scarce resources, who wins, who loses, and what's the consequence. That for me was a process in just self-discovery.
Yeah.
I never intended to be in politics. You don't do an MD and a PhD to run for office.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a surgeon. And I did the biology part because that was the preparation to do that. It's funny because, for me, one of the overwhelming recognitions of my upbringing was like, we used to go to the Eastern market to get halal meat at Saad's. So for the Michigan listeners, they know about Saad's. And we would, at the time, you couldn't just get like, I want a steak, I want, a hindquarter. You just got to get the whole thing slaughtered. And then we would go and divvy up the meat, and we would take the meat to some of the lower income folks that my dad had built relationships with in the city. And it was crazy to me because even at that time, I was like, being in urban Detroit felt more like being in Egypt than it felt like being in the burbs where I grew up. I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I could go 15 hours and travel a 10-year life expectancy gap to Egypt, or I could go 15 minutes from where I grew up and travel the same gap. I wanted to do something about that, and I thought medicine was going to be the pathway.
That's fascinating. Are you still convinced that's the case?
I'm convinced for different reasons. I thought that the practice of medicine would allow me to try and address those circumstances. I realized at the end of medical school that I was training to practice in a system that itself was part of the problem. And I went as far as I had applied for residency. I thought, you know what, I'll practice and I'll also do public health work. And then I had an encounter with a patient that frankly just made it clear that the only way forward was to try and work outside the system to fix the system. So I actually pulled my residency application and decided I was a lot more interested in the public health side of things. How do you fix the air we breathe, the water we drink, the system that denies too many people the healthcare that they should be able to get as a matter of being human in America, that is often denied because it comes at the wrong cost of making sure a CEO of a pharmaceutical company or a healthcare company makes just a little bit less, right? Yeah. So I, unfortunately, it was my time in the system that made me realize that actually a lot of this work was civic work, and started to lean more into the politics side of things in my work in public health.
You were at Columbia for a while as well. You graduated from Columbia and you taught there.
I did.
Correct?
Yeah.
What's your take on Columbia today?
Honestly, it's embarrassing, man. Like, I'm embarrassed that that it's my alma mater. And look, at the end of the day, like, you can zero out Columbia. The thing that kills me the most is that the president who folded herself was of Egyptian ethnicity. I'm like, come on. Like, you can't. And look, at the end of the day, not everybody knows how to stand up to bullies. And I think folks thought that they could get away not standing up and that they would be left to their own devices. And at the end of the day, that just never works. And it's hard because I'm like, in your heart of hearts, you know better. You know better. But it is a complicated place. I also tell you that, folks like Abdul El-Sayed taught there, and it has a history of some really important scholarship when it comes to engaging with the reality of the civics and the politics that have created such an imbalance when it comes to Israel and their actions when it comes to the rights of Palestinians. So it's complicated, but I got to say right now it has not dressed itself up in shining colors, and it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, no.
And I'll be honest with I'm proud of I was the valedictorian in my class at Michigan. I wore Michigan colors on the lacrosse field. And at the same time, similarly, when you look at the behavior of the University of Michigan, it's the same story. And so you kind of have to think past the independent university and start asking, how have the economics and the politics of higher education gotten so deformed away from the notion and the value of righteous ideas that you now see universities folding when it comes to being intellectually bullied by the smallest people in our society?
How can you change that, though, as senator in Michigan?
I think there's a couple ways. Number one, it is trying to address this broken economics. I mean, at the end of the day, universities are behaving like corporations. They guard their endowment with everything they've got. And then you ask, like, what was an endowment for if it wasn't to protect you and to protect the people on your campus for being able to do the thing that was at the core of the mission? And a lot of that is also the explanation for why being a student in America has gotten so expensive. Being a professor in America the people who are teaching most of the classes, non-tenured professors, are making a pittance for the work that they do. These are people who've spent a long time in school only to make, barely the amount of money that they need to live their lives. It also explains so often why these universities are more beholden to their donors than they are to their students and their faculty. And so I think thinking about the regulatory atmosphere, I think we should limit the amount of overhead that a university can collect that it's not spending on its educational or research mission. I think we need to really be thinking about how we start capping the absurd inflation for the cost of higher education. I think we need to be thinking about the impact that donors can have on board and operational decisions. I think we need, real educational legislation that starts to ask, why has a college education become so unaffordable, and why has the idea of freedom of speech on campuses become such a farce?
Yeah. You ran for governor of Michigan. What did you learn then that you're leveraging now? I mean, you received death threats. Talk about bullying. There was a lot of death threats and people coming after you. What did you learn from then? And you're sort of applying it to now.
Couple of things. Number one, don't be 32 and never run for office. Solve that problem. Number two,
no gray hair though. Just says, you're doing good.
Well, I'm trying. I'm like, a little bit of frosted temples would be amazing. I should not complain. Honestly, I have.
Well, this turned gray post October 7th.
That's number one. Number two, I used to be really precious about the critique. I wanted everybody to agree with me about why what was wrong was wrong. And I've come to the realization that not everybody's going to agree with you on the critique. I need people to agree with me on the solutions. However you get to the idea that corporations are dominating our politics and we should stop that, cool. However you get to the idea that we need to stand with working people, we need to be invested in small business instead of big businesses, however you got there, cool. However you get to the idea that you deserve healthcare, great. I'm less interested about debating the meanings of big words. I'm a lot more interested in making sure that we're delivering for the basic needs of everyday folk. And the third thing I'll tell you is this. People are not going to support you because they dislike your opponent. They're going to support you because you've built an indelible relationship where they know that you've listened, they understand what you think, and they know you warts and all, right? Nobody's perfect. I'm not trying to sell a perfect image of myself. I would never do that because I'm deeply imperfect. But I want people to know what makes me tick and why and how I come to this work and what I'm going to say. Like, what you want to be as a politician is wholly predictable, like clockwork. Yeah. When I look at what he's saying, I know what he's going to say because his values are clear and they map to his positions, and that's where he is. And where there's any differentiation, you better do the work of explaining how you got to where you got. And I think too often politicians take their talking points from the corporations and the special interests who buy them off. And so you never really know where they're going to stand, except where they're going to stand with them. And they don't do the work of explaining. Like, I believe in radical transparency. You know what I mean? I want you to know how I'm thinking, why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, and what I'm going to do next, so you know me. And if you don't like me after you know me, that's okay. Not everybody's going to. But I want you to know me. And if I can do that, I'm rather certain people are going to understand that I really, 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 really want them to have healthcare. And I really, really, really want them to have the nice things. And I believe that the only way to do that is if we come together to do it.
Why are you doing this to yourself?
I knew my grandmother.
No, I know, but you're putting yourself
My dad asked me the same question.
Yeah, I mean, look,
he's like, wait, so you already had a government job and you're going to quit your government job to take another government job that pays you less?
But you could do so much more too. I mean, you did a little bit of media with your podcast. There's just so much more you could do financially, right? Do you like pain? Because everybody's coming at you. We're going to talk about the Hasan Piker thing a little bit later. Everybody's gunning for you. Let's just be very clear about this. And we know why. We know that they're coming after you, but why are you putting yourself through it? And I'm asking you as a brother, and I promise you, your dad did not tell me to ask this question, just to be clear.
I was like, where is he? So to do some Arabic exegesis here, the root letter, the root word of amn, aman, and amana are all the same. Amn and aman are about security. And I was raised with so much more security than my cousins in Egypt. And in that is a responsibility, amana. And I really want to be able to, when my time is done, say I did everything I could with what I had and I put it all on the line. So if life is about accumulating things or accumulating power or accumulating prestige, there are pathways to do that. If life is about trying to take whatever power and prestige and resources you've got to try and empower people who don't have those things, then that's why I'm trying to do this. And look, at the end of the day, I am in a position to be able to engage in a conversation in a particular way, in a particular place, that a lot of people who've got similar experiences to me will never have. And, you know, my question is, can I use those opportunities to be serving for folk? And the other thing about it is, you know, I think there's a split screen through which a lot of people who have family back home, wherever back home is, and who are born and raised in America, there's a split screen through which we see our politics. One is, how do we make sure that we're providing the good things for people here? And one is, how do you protect people who live on the wrong side of American power, who are thousands of miles away? And what's brutally obvious about this moment is those two questions are one and the same. In an era where our kids' schools are crumbling, our Michigan literacy rates are like cratering. You got third graders, eighth graders who can barely read. And we're sending our money to drop bombs on other people's children, whether it's subsidizing a genocide in Gaza, it's allowing settlers to destroy the West Bank, empowering Israel through the war that they've been trying to push for 40 years to annex southern Lebanon, creating war in Iran, a country of 93 million, spiking our gas prices. That money should not be spent in $1 billion a day killing other people's children. It should be spent providing for our own. And I happen to be in a position to be able to say that with a level of clarity. All of my work has been about trying to provide for people in our country. It has been about trying to make sure they have healthcare, putting glasses on kids' faces, standing up to the polluters who are polluting their air, making sure they're not drinking leaded water in their schools, making sure they have Narcan because the big pharmaceutical corporations tried to convince everybody that opioids were some kind of miracle drug. That has been my whole career. And every time you talk about trying to give kids glasses or stand up to polluters or put Narcan in vending machines or eliminate medical debt, you know, people say to you, doctor, how are you going to pay for that? I really wish people asked the same question to a general drawing up war plans to drop bombs on other people's children. General, how are you going to pay for that? And I hope to be the person who does that.
Just play devil's advocate here, just for the community, right? What makes you think you can make a difference? We've seen everything that's been going on since October 7th with the genocide, even before that. We've seen politicians, I'm not going to name any politicians, who say one thing and then do something completely different, ostensibly within, you know, pro-Palestinian movement as well, right? That they say that they support us, but they don't when they get into office. Why are you different, and why do you really think you can make a difference here?
Look, you know, my stepfather was Palestinian. My sisters were Palestinian. My best friend growing up was Palestinian. I've been thinking about the inequity of this question for a very long time. And I also, because of my upbringing, I've never belonged to any tribe. I was not Egyptian enough for the Egyptians because my stepmom who raised me was white. You know, I was obviously not white. And I've always tried to really hold myself to a level of clarity when it comes to what our ethics and our morals ought to be about. And the question of Palestine is not a question of tribe. The question of Palestine is a question of justice. It's a question of equal access to human rights. That's what it is. Do we believe that all humans feel pain and that all humans ought to have the basic rights, dignity, self-determination, peace? And so I come at this because my upbringing's given me access to a lot of different types of folks. And I've had to, as a matter of survival, I've had to learn how to translate what I'm thinking or translate between different groups of people. And I've been doing that my whole life. Politics is a team sport. I alone cannot make a difference. We together can. And it's people who are of Palestinian origin. It's people who are white. It's people who are Jewish and Israeli. It's people who are from Africa. It's black folk. It's brown folk. It's Asian folk. It's all of us coming together to insist upon that least common denominator that is being violated when it comes to this particular question. So if I'm in a position not to be the whole team, right, but to play a unique role on the team, then that'd be great, right? And at the end of the day, it's not just about this. It is about recognizing that this inconsistency in the moral fabric of our public discussion has also justified so many other inconsistencies. When you've got a mom who can't take her kid to the doctor in the middle of the state of Michigan, ask yourself why that doctor's visit's not free.
Mm.
If you've got a school that's crumbling and you got first graders trying to study wearing coats in the middle of winter in the heart of Detroit, ask yourself why that school's not a competent, dignified place for those little kids. And then remind yourself that we're spending the money that should be spent for them, dropping bombs on other people. And that shit doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I just happen to be in a position to be able to say it from a particular place as someone whose work has been defined by trying to build better schools for these kids and provide better healthcare for those folks. And if that allows me to speak the truth, then I hope I can speak it. And I will say this, it's not that much about whether or not I can make a difference. It's more about whether or not I can sit idly by if there's something I could do.
Mm.
And that's the way I think about it. What I could do for that mom, what I could do for those kids, what I can do for those parents and those families over there. At the end of the day, you know, in our tradition, if you see injustice, you ought to correct it with your hands. If you can't correct it in your hands, you correct it with your mouth. If you can't correct it with your mouth, then correct it in your heart. But that is the least of faith. And I happen to be in a position where I can do something about it. So I'm going to.
I respect that. How can you assure the community that you're not going to be tainted, that you're not going to turn your back on the community?
I can't. You know, I mean, the reality of it is that
Wait a minute. He just said he can't. No other politician, to give you credit here, I'm not trying to blow smoke here, but no other politician would give me that response.
I mean, there is nothing I can tell you about what I will do in the future that you can believe because we have not lived in the future. Maybe that's just a scientist in me. What I can tell you is the best predictor of where a line goes is where it's been. And, you know, I have an unfortunate habit of saying the truth everywhere I go, pissing off people on every side of an issue because I see the truth for what I see it to be, and I just say it. Now, the thing I will tell you is I am not beholden to the people who are on the wrong side of these issues. They want to take my face off, which they are lining up to do. You know, they say, know me by my enemies, and, you know, ask people who they hate most on this issue and who they fear most, and a lot of them will point to me. So, you know, at the end of the day, those things speak. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the future holds. And I know for sure that there are going to be people who disagree with something I said. They're not going to like some word verbiage in a statement. They're not going to, and you know what, like that's the hard part about being this. I'll tell you, you mentioned a couple times like the hate I get from the obvious people who hate me because of who I am.
Yeah.
That's actually not what hurts the most. It's the hate you get from people who should know you and should trust you. So the thing I will tell you is this. I actually think it's really important that none of us put all our eggs in any one politician, and that politics is a team sport. So if your quarterback is not playing the way your quarterback needs to play, you pull your quarterback. But at the same time, if your quarterback, right, is playing a pretty damn good game, then you got to trust your quarterback. And the thing I'll tell you is, so long as I get to play in a position where I am fighting for justice and equity for everybody, where I'm consistent with my my values and consistently willing to stand up to folks who oppose those values, then I hope folks will give me the benefit of the doubt. The other thing I'll tell you about politics is, I used to be a professor. And the nice thing about being a professor is you can say whatever, but nobody has to listen to you. In politics, you trade those things. You can do things. But sometimes, if you want to do something, you have to choose not to say something. There's this great quote by Edmund Burke. He said, sometimes I choose to withhold the truth so that I may speak it for longer later. And I think sometimes our community, we're more interested. We have given up on actually winning, on actually creating peace and justice. And so we'd rather just people say it very loudly. And I'm just not willing to give up on actually winning. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, all I'll tell you is I know who I am. I know what I believe. I think most people who've watched me know who I am and what I believe, and hold me accountable to who I say I am and what I say I believe.
So on my way to the interview, on that note, on my way to the interview today to meet with you, I'm not going to mention names. A good friend of mine sent him a message, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Abdul. And not exact quote, but the summary was he's a normalizer. Can you give...
Normalizer of?
Israel's actions, supporting Israel. just normalizing Israel's existence, generally speaking, and what they're doing. There are many layers to it, as you can imagine. So I want to see if you could just give your unequivocal stance on the situation vis-a-vis Palestine and Israel.
Yeah. I believe in equal rights to dignity, self-determination, and peace for all people. And I believe that people need to be the champions of their own future. And I believe that any action that our government is taking to stop that from happening, to stand in the way of the equal rights of peace, dignity, and self-determination for Palestinians is wrong, and I oppose it. Whether that is foreign military aid, whether that is weapons sales in contradiction to our own laws, whether that is running cover at the UN or other international bodies of justice, I believe all of that needs to stop. If that makes me a normalizer, okay. I think the question is ultimately, how do you, in action, beget the outcomes that you want? I think sometimes, though, that people mistake empathy for other people's pain to be a willingness to stand up for their injustice, and they're not the same thing. You can both empathize with the real pain that people experience and disagree with what they do out of that pain. And I think, frankly, if you really want to intervene against injustice, you have to be able to hold in that cognitive dissonance, which is to say you have real pain and bad things really did get done to you, and it does not justify what you did. And that is true in human relationships across the board. I think sometimes in our community, we fall into this with us or against us. So you better be apologizing for anything that we did, and you better be indicting for anything they did. I'm never going to be that guy. Again, our tradition teaches us, in fact, inscripted on the sword of the prophet, peace be upon him, speak the truth even if it be against yourself. And I think we've got to do that. And it doesn't mean that bad actions taken on the part of anyone who you generally agree with means that they are wrong and ought to be indicted forever. It just means that that's a bad action. They shouldn't do that. You can say that and at the same time say that does not justify this other bad action being done here. And I think the more that we are willing to be objective about our own values and say, these are the standards and this is what we believe, the faster we are going to get to a position where, the reality of the situation is unimpeachable. Israel committed a genocide. Israel on any given day is committing apartheid. Israel on any given day is committing war crimes. And all of that needs to be stopped, and our country's engagement in that needs to be stopped.
So how does this end, though?
God willing, in peace.
What does that look like?
I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's not my decision to make. This is the thing about it, is like, I think that people who are running for office in the United States of America need to stop telling other people there how to beget the ultimate peace. I think if we all understood that our job is to create conditions in which that peace can happen, and certainly stop running cover for creating conditions in which that peace can never happen, I think if every American politician came to that and said, you know what, at the end of the day, that is for the Palestinian people and Jewish Israelis to figure out, and it is not for us to get to decide, and we need to stop doing the things that are stopping peace from happening, I think we would be getting to peace. I don't know what that looks like. I don't, right? Some folks believe that that's 2 states. Some folks believe that that's 1 state with equal laws and equal access for everybody. That is not my decision to make. I'm running for Senate from Michigan. My job is to make sure that my tax dollars don't make that worse while failing to actually provide for the people in Michigan.
Yeah. You can see, though, why that would hurt people given the situation. I mean, I understand and appreciate your answer, but come on, there's a genocide. You got to take a harder line. You got to really say more and say enough.
What is a harder line than enough? Because what I'm saying is enough, right? Like my job at the end of the day, right? I'm running for Senate from Michigan. My job is to make sure that the resources that I help to control as a U.S. Senator are not being misspent to destroy other people. That is saying enough. My job is to make sure that the government that I in part represent does not run cover for another government committing apartheid and genocide. that is saying enough. My job is often to be the lone voice arguing for equal rights for Palestinians and the Palestinian ideal of being able to have self-determination. So I guess my question is, what would you want a senator to do if it's not that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like that is something that we have not seen very many senators do. The other thing I'll tell you is this.
Any senators.
The other thing I'll tell you is this. I think sometimes people mistake style for substance. You know, my job is to go and have that conversation with anyone and everyone. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the emotions of it, and we don't recognize that the best way to have a conversation sometimes with people who are not caught up with those emotions is to level with them in the place that they are. So when I'm having a conversation with a little old lady in Brighton who does not really pay attention to the issue, has been fed all kinds of mis and disinformation about Palestinians and the Palestinian people, do you want me to go yell? Or would you rather me sit down and say, look, my job is to make sure you have healthcare, your grandkids have healthcare. And right now, your money, my money, all of our money is being used to drop bombs on other people's hospitals instead of to uplift your own. So where do you think we should go? What do you think works better? And maybe it's my training in medicine. Imagine every doctor you had a conversation with, right, who's telling you have cancer, starts weeping and crying. Is that what you want your doctor to do? You want them to be able to show up. You want them to feel pain with you, but you want them to be able to stay steady because you need them in that moment. Leadership is not just mirroring the worst emotions. Leadership is trying to come forward and ask what can be done to translate pain in language everyone can understand to beget outcomes that everybody wants. Because I promise you, that little old lady in Brighton agrees with us. The problem, though, is that too often when she talks about our issue, right, she sees a level of emotion that might obfuscate her ability to think through it in terms that she understands. I've been trying my whole life to get people to see the Palestinian issue from the position of Palestinians. And I'll be honest with you, I think sometimes the best way for folks to see the Palestinian issue is to see the Palestinian issue from the perspective of your self-interest as an American.
So on that note, then, what message would you give to Palestinian Americans?
I'm with you. I believe in your foundational rights as people in America to have healthcare and good schools. And I believe in your family's rights to have peace, dignity, and self-determination in your own homeland. And I believe that that right is equal to the rights of all people to have those things. And right now, that right is being trampled upon, and I will stand up consistently to make sure that it's not, whether I'm the lone voice or, God willing, a voice among many. But you're not hiring me to be a lone voice. You're hiring me to build a coalition toward peace, justice, and equity. And my job is to be able to translate that pain into purpose. That's my job. So if you want a shoulder to cry on, maybe I'm not that guy. If you want someone who's going to be louder than you, maybe I'm not that guy. But if you want someone who can understand your pain and translate it into communities to which you don't have access, who can have an honest conversation about the foundational human issues that bring us all to this table, beyond your identity, your rights as a person, and the rights of your family members as people, and to translate those in the lowest common denominator understanding to people across our country to beget the kind of policy outcomes that we want that would actually stop this injustice from happening, then maybe I'm your guy.
So I think a good segue there is the Temple Israel, the situation that occurred there. If you could replay that moment and how you responded, would you respond any differently? And I want to say this: you got criticized clearly on both sides. I think, and I'm going to focus obviously on more the Palestinian side, the Arab side, is that you equivocated, you backed off, you capitulated, whatever word they want to use. If you could, A, redo that whole situation and how you responded, and B, offer your critique to that criticism.
I wouldn't have done it any differently. I was shocked horrified. I mean, I grew up 15 minutes away from Temple Israel. I knew a lot of people who worshiped there. And we have to be absolutely clear that there is no room for hatred of Jewish people and anti-Semitism and targeting people 6,000 miles away for a thing being done by a foreign government. There is no room for that. And if you think that that's equivocation, I just disagree with you, because I'm not a tribalist. It's not about tribe. I love and revere Judaism and the Jewish people. I do. And I recognize that we have a responsibility to stand up against injustice wherever it is. And a lot of what I tried to do in my statement was to offer context for why a man who clearly acted inappropriately, unjustly, for why he was in a state of mind to do a terrible anti-Semitic thing. You can both say that is terrible and anti-Semitic and should not have happened. And you can offer context for the circumstances that created it. I got a PhD in epidemiology. Epidemiology, unfortunately, is the science, the bitter science of counting bad things that happen to people. And the only reason you count bad things and try to reach patterns is to stop them from happening. That's the only reason. So I tried to apply that same logic to say, why did this thing happen? Certainly, this man had agency. He made a bad choice. He made a terrible, awful, anti-Semitic choice. And he was displacing a level of rage at the loss of an innocent nephew and niece, 2 kids, killed in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. That Israeli airstrike should never have happened. The war in Iran should never have happened. The genocide in Gaza should never have happened. Israel's actions, our subsidizing it, should never have happened. And I want to live in a world where a man never commits an anti-Semitic attack on a synagogue. And I want to live in a world where innocent children don't get bombed by Israel. And you can speak to both of those things at the same time. And anyone who tries to tell you that you can't is trying to put one group's pain over another. And I'll never do that. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to be led by principle. Validating the pain of people who have been attacked unjustly is right. It is important to do, even if you may disagree with those people on something else they might believe. And when we lose that ability, we lose our foundational humanity, and this just becomes us versus them. This is not us versus them.
What's your take on that synagogue? And I could be wrong, but this is my understanding, is that they were raising money for the IDF.
They may have been.
And they
almost certainly did.
And they had land sale in the Palestinian territories. What's your commentary, if any, on that? And not justifying the action, to be very, very clear. That you're not doing that.
I can both disagree with that action and also believe that they were unjustly attacked.
Yeah.
So like the notion that somebody is doing a thing you disagree with does not now open up the ability for somebody to attack them. What happened, the notion that somehow anything that happened in that synagogue justified an attack by that individual, that's beyond the pale to me. And it is important for us to be able to say that, right? Because at the end of the day, you can oppose what they are doing and oppose violent action against them in an unjust way. So look, I want us to be very clear, right? And I just got to be honest with folks. Like, you cannot appeal to the logic that says that somebody did something you disagree with that now opens up the right of action against them, because otherwise you are justifying the exact thing that you don't want done to you, right? And like to me, again, I'm always going to put principle first. And so, I think it's really, really important for all of us to understand that. Like, we are appealing to a foundational basis of human rights in which people are not violently attacked for who they are.
So let's talk about Hasan Piker. First of all, Hasan Piker or Ed Hasan? Which one do you prefer? Probably me right now.
Look, at the end of the day, I don't know. I love you both.
I appreciate that.
At the end of the day, I love
Hasan's the man, to be very clear.
Look,
Hasan is the man.
I love all people. And this is the interesting thing, right? There's this notion that you automatically underwrite everything that the person you're talking to says, which is insane, right? Like, it's just an insane thing. I don't agree.
But really quick, do you mind just giving the audience an understanding of why you're getting attacked?
So we're having a set of rallies with Hasan Piker and Representative Summer Lee in Ann Arbor and East Lansing coming up here in the next week. And all of a sudden, the entire establishment, Third Way, ADL, all of them are now dissembling over this, which is funny because Hasan Piker was invited to stream from the DNC by Vice President Harris in 2024. And I'm wondering why these very same people weren't up in arms about it then. Hasan has said some things I disagree with. Everybody said some things I disagree with. You've said some things I disagree with. I've said some things you disagree with. Your wife has said things you disagree with. My wife has said things I disagree with. That's life. But the notion that we are going to play this game of trying to pretend that there's like this platform police is insane. The reason, right, I'm excited to do these events is because I know he's speaking to people I really want to speak to. And I want to have a conversation about how we build a politics where we can answer difficult questions about why you can't afford your rent, about why you don't have healthcare, about why your education is so expensive, and about why our tax dollars are being spent dropping bombs on other people's kids instead of being spent here at home to invest in our kids. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. And I'm going to go to the places where disaffected people are because I want to be able to talk to them because I want to build a politics where they feel included and engaged with. And this is exactly the problem that I think Democrats have had for a very long time, right? We think that some audiences are not important enough to reach to. And I just don't. I think I want to reach out to everybody.
What's the attack on Hasan? I mean, because he's brilliant. I mean, I think they're going after you and him, obviously, but because of the platform. If he were on their side, they would love him, right?
And their attack is they are taking things out of context he said, despite the fact that like he has taken great pains to condemn anti-Semitism, to condemn any attempt to tie the government of Israel to the Jewish people. Folks will take things that he said out of context and then try and smear him with those things. Now, the guy streams for like 8 hours a day, every single day. At the end of the day, it's nearly impossible not to take him out of context. So, you know, at the end of the day, if people want to make bad faith attacks, they're welcome to do that. And it's hard not to think that it's not about Hasan, given that Hasan streamed at the DNC at the invitation of Vice President Harris. It seems to be more about me. And at the end of the day, like this was always the attack. Now, I've taken great care, always taken great care to make sure that people understand that my righteous criticism of the state of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu and AIPAC are based in my belief in the rights and dignity of all people. And those are different from my belief in the rights and dignity and my love and reverence for the Jewish people. And in fact, any attempt to tie those two together itself is a form of anti-Semitism, which is so frustrating because you see it happening consistently from people who want to then come after me by trying to argue that my positions against Israel and my positions against AIPAC are somehow about Jews and Judaism, which they are not.
So what's your message then regarding Hasan Piker? Your one-liner for everybody to know.
Looking forward to a great event where we're going to have like 1,000 people at each one, where we're going to talk about how we take on anti-Semitism, how we take on AIPAC, and how we take on Israeli politics that have created, you know, deep injustice in the world.
So you know what's fascinating about what you're doing here? Most politicians would have immediately distanced themselves from Hasan, canceled the event, and run away and do something different.
I don't back down.
Clearly, you don't back down.
Ever.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, I don't back down to anybody. Look, at the end of the day, like, I speak what I believe. And there are people on all sides of an issue who are disagreeing with me. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm sure there are going to be listeners to this podcast who are like, well, you know, that guy, I can't trust him. Okay. You know what I mean? I told you what I believe. I told you why I believe it. And hold me accountable to what I say I believe. You know what I mean? And if you don't agree with me, it's okay. You know what I mean? That's life.
Yeah. So just really quick, the uncommitted movement, the pivot for this last presidential election, for me, for example, you know, I voted for Jill Stein. We're just not bought into the Democratic Party after everything that happened with Biden. What's your message to those individuals that are voting green? Because it's obviously, look, I'm going to support you. I'm going to support Rashida and so on and so forth. But it's like, can we really win here? Can we really win when the Congress is just so polluted, right? Do we need a third party?
I endorse uncommitted because I believe that Biden's handling of this genocide was unconscionable, unethical, immoral, wrong. And then I endorsed Kamala Harris. And I did that because whether you saw that election from the eyes of a child in Gaza or the eyes of a child in Detroit, Trump would have been worse. And we're living in that reality now. A vote is not about the past. It's about the future. No politician is perfect. No political circumstance is perfect. And I said this thing earlier, I want us to think a little bit about now, which is, do we want to express our emotions or do we want to change things? And sometimes those two things are not the same. And the hardest part about politics is that you have an emotional response to a thing and you still got to deal with the facts on the ground. And whatever your emotional response is, if you want catharsis, go somewhere else. Politics is not for catharsis. Politics is for changing things. And so, my message to folks is, you know where I stand. I've told you why I stand where I stand. I've been consistent about where I stand. And I hope that given where I stand, you'll support what I'm trying to do. But if you're looking for catharsis, again, that's not my job.
Yeah.
That's not my job. My job is to try and change the circumstance to beget justice for people. That's my job.
Would you like to give, for the final segment, one last message, looking at that camera?
Yeah, look, we've got an opportunity in 2026 to rethink our politics. I am the biggest threat to everything AIPAC holds dear. I am the biggest threat to a movement that says that there is no capacity to talk to and talk through the foundational injustice of a MAGA-backed, corporate-backed special interest trying to tie our interests to the interests of a foreign government, that there is no opportunity to start pulling foreign military aid from the likes of Israel, but then also Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and all of the other places we spend our money, that there is no opportunity to stand up to the kind of politics that tells us that some people's pain is more important than your pain. We have that opportunity in 2026. I hope that folks will support us. Go to abdulforsenate.com, and I hope that folks will follow what we're saying. I will stand deeply on justice. I'll stand deeply on principle. But this is a team sport. I can't do it alone. I know what I'm up against. AIPAC is spending tens of millions potentially in this race directed at my face because I have been clear about the fact that I don't believe that we should be subsidizing genocide, that I want to spend our money to provide our own people health care and good schools, that I believe in the rights and dignity and self-determination of Palestinian people, that I believe that our taxes should not go to buying tanks and bombs for other people. So I hope that folks will support us. And I look forward, hopefully, as we travel, look forward to meeting you and hearing from you and engaging with you. And if I've said something you disagree with, I'm looking forward to hearing you with you. Change my mind, right? But it's a conversation. And we have to be willing to invest in the courage of our ideals and our conviction, not founded in any sort of tribal affiliation or identity, founded in our foundational belief in the dignity of all people and human rights for all people to stand up to the injustices that we're seeing. So I look forward to getting to meet you. I hope that you'll support us. I'm grateful to you, Ed, for hosting us here. It's a lovely conversation. And look forward to continuing the conversation, hopefully someday soon.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Listen, stay tuned, cause it's time for Sumud.